Hello everyone and welcome back to Make the Music, and today my goal is to give you 3 simple steps when it comes to mastering your track in the home studio. There's a lot of confusing, misleading information about how to actually master your track in the home studio. Very long, convoluted videos, and I just thought I wanted to give a very simple guide for doing it. Really, there's only 3 simple steps to mastering your track and getting it to a place where it sounds like it could fit with everything else, whether it's on a radio or the streaming service. And when you go from track to track, yours sounds just like it should be, so that no one has to turn the volume up or down or there's something weird about it, but it fits right in, and that is the goal with our home studio here. So let's get right into the 3 steps. The first step is to bring your track into a new session or your mix into a new session, and then find a reference. And the key here is to find a reference that is similar in style to your track, something that you think sounds good, has the loudness you're looking for, has some of the characteristics of your track. It doesn't have to be completely identical, obviously, but it has enough of the characteristics that you're shooting for. Then either purchase that track or find a way to bring it into your session so that you have the finished master. It's very important that you have the master for that. And so this is the mix of a track I've done. It's not nearly loud enough for what it needs to be for a commercial release. And it sounds like this. I'll just play a few seconds. So that's what my track sounds like. And then I picked a Radiohead track that has a similar sound that I'm going to be using as my reference. It sounds like this. Really quickly here, this audio might get loud as we're going to start getting our audio up to a pretty loud level here. That is the point of mastering. When I'm mixing, it's not really about me maximizing as much volume-wise or anything like that. When the mastering phase, you're definitely going to want to do that. So here's the thing. When you master a track, you want to put a VU meter on your track and the reference that you have. That's step 2. Measure the volume difference here. And so for a commercial release, especially these days, you're going to be shooting for somewhere between -8 and -10 RMS, which is root mean squared. And essentially, that's just the average volume of your track. Now, peak volume does not matter. That's what this thing here shows, that it peaked at 0.3. We don't really care about that, okay? The peak volume is not what's important. It's the average volume that's important, and it's measured in either RMS or LUFS. The point is, I'm going to bring some plugins in here that can show you where your master needs to be, and it's really easy because we're going to be comparing it to an actual commercial release here. So I'm going to bring up a VU meter plugin. It comes stock with Reaper, okay? And my apologies if this gets a little loud here, but I have to prove the point. You want to go to the loudest point of the track that you feel has the most going on, and watch this VU meter here. So you can see this is sitting around mostly -10, went into the -9 range on occasion. Don't worry about the peak there. That happens in transition with the track, and I'll explain that later. So it looks like we're going to be shooting for around -9 RMS with our track, and this master is actually quite a bit older than some of the commercial stuff that comes out, which is a little bit louder. It really can be genre specific. This, for me, it's a modern rock pop track is what my track is. I really want to compete as much as possible with everything else that's commercial these days. So I want to sit around -8 RMS. I just know that number going in, and when comparing to the reference, it kind of confirmed that. If you're mixing something like EDM, it might need to be even louder, like -6, -5 RMS. But if you're mixing something like, I don't know, acoustic jazz session, it doesn't need to be mixed as loud. It doesn't need to be mastered as loud, right? Because it's definitely more experimental form of music. If someone goes from a pop track to a jazz track, they're not expecting it to be the same crazy volume. But if you're going from a modern pop track or hip hop track to something of the rock genre, you're not going to want the listener to be distracted by how much quieter it is. So we know we're shooting for -8, -9 RMS-ish. Now, the first thing I'm going to do actually is make some EQ changes here. And so I'm actually going to drag down the volume of this track to where I feel like they sound close to the same volume. Okay, and then this one. Okay, that's actually a pretty good volume comparison there. I'm going to take an EQ plugin. It can be a stock EQ, doesn't matter. And I'm going to listen back and forth and see what the differences are between my track and the reference. All right, right away I can tell mine has a lot less like lower mid information. And so I'm going to add a bit of that in this stage here. Now, the key is to not go overboard with these EQ moves. This would be too much, just for instance there. But adding a couple dB here or there it can make a big difference and is okay. So let's listen to this now. In my opinion, that's a lot closer, and maybe just a little air in the top. And don't be afraid when you're in the mastering stage to start really boosting aggressively, because I want to get this track up to volume. It's going to get slammed and it's going to be loud. So I'm okay with adding stuff. I'm not really trying to gain match either. Let me check with the reference again here. Okay, obviously it's not going to match 100%, but that feels a lot closer in my opinion. So I like where that's heading. Now it's time to maximize the volume. So I'm going to put this back at 0 dB. And now we're going to use a limiter. And what's really important is you don't just want to use one limiter in your mastering stage here. So this would be step 3, getting the volume to match your reference point. We're actually going to be using multiple limiters. And the reason is when a limiter starts to crush the track so much to bring up the volume, the fidelity starts to get interesting when you're doing 5, 6, 7 dB of gain reduction. I'd rather use multiple limiters with a few dB of gain reduction and bringing up the track than using one limiter where it's sort of maxing out its abilities. So I'm going to start with this wave stereo limiter here. And my goal is to add some gain reduction for sure, and then finish it off with another limiter. Like I said, this might get loud. Okay, make sure you're just listening to your track and not the reference. And I'm going to be watching for this gain reduction here. I'm going to put it on auto release. All right, that added quite a bit of loudness. I don't feel like it's doing too much damage to the transients. Let's bring in the VU meter. So you can see it's sitting around -12, -11. We're getting very close. I felt like there's a little too much distortion though. Now what I'm going to do is bring in the secret weapon, just the Slate FGX2. Now if there was a different plugin, I would use it, but this plugin, I don't know how else to explain this gain function here other than it's pure magic. It just really adds gain in a very clean way. I'm going to switch over to RMS here and we can look at the meter. And now I'm going to bring up this gain here and it's going to get it closer to where we need to be. All right, we're doing really good at this point. Let's look at the reference here. All right, so we're right in the ballpark loudness wise. Now here's another key, setting your ceiling. You do not want to set the ceiling at 0. And the reason you don't want to set the ceiling at 0 is when your track finally gets uploaded to the streaming services and they add their own compression to it, they do all their different processing to it. What's going to happen is the fidelity of that is going to get lost a little bit. And you'll actually, if you set the ceiling to 0, your track will actually clip when it goes out to streaming services or when it goes to CD. So I like to put the ceiling at -0.3. This is not enough to where you can like hear the difference between, -0.3 dB. You can't really tell, honestly. But it gives your track enough wiggle room that it's not going to clip automatically or anything like that when it goes out to the streaming services or CD. So I've set the ceiling at -0.3. And of course you want to use your ears, but I can see here that the RMS is around -9, -8. This is perfect. It's exactly where I want the track to be. If you're just sitting there, it's going to be plenty loud for a commercial release. So I will just play here the difference between the mastered and unmastered track. So here was my mix. And then mastered. Okay, obviously way louder, right? But that is the point of mastering, right? Another thing with mastering too is you cannot fix mix issues with mastering. You can try, but if there's something off level wise in the mix, there's something just structurally wrong with what's going on, it's really difficult to take care of the mastering phase. And when you put a bunch of limiters on something, you'll find that maybe there was an issue that you didn't discover before, especially if you don't use any bus compression in your mix, which I advocate for. You'll find that, oh man, my drums are not hitting nearly hard enough. They're getting squashed by that limiter. It's because I mix my drums in a way that it works well with compression. And so you might have to go back in the mix, make some changes, bring the mix back in, and then finally limit it once again here. So the 3 steps, right? Find a reference, find out what volume that reference is, find out what your target volume is. Then step 2, bring in some EQ, try and match the mix more tonally to your reference track. And then finally use multiple stages limiting to get that track to -8 RMS. And then if I go over here to LUFS, it's going to be around -5 LUFS. That's where you want to get your track to sit if you want to be on par with commercial releases. And that is the process. That is the simple way in your home studio to get a master that works. You don't need to overcomplicate it more than that. I spent a lot of time getting a great mix. I do these steps here. You don't need 20 plugins on your mastering chain. This is all you need. And you're going to get your mix to a point where it's going to sound great when you put it out to streaming services. So that is the process. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments section down below, and I'll see you guys next time.